All right, I see the recording light came on.
It has indeed. All right, so good morning, everybody. It is Roxy and Rebecca with you again this morning, and we thank you for joining us. We are going to talk about Category 2 budget and mini bids for North Carolina, and this is quite the detailed presentation because there are changes to both the Category 2 and the mini bid process for funding year 2021. We will be posting the presentation and the slide deck this afternoon for you to review if you need to. And as always, we'll do a question and answer session at the end of the training. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The training topics for today are Category 2 budgets. We will show you the new Category 2 budget tool that USAC has and demo how to work that budget tool so that you can see the budget tool for your school system, or your library. We will talk about the North Carolina School Connectivity Initiative and Category 2, so you'll see how DPI helps out there. We'll talk about the state master contracts and competitive bidding in North Carolina. We'll talk about what a mini bid is and why you have to do one, and North Carolina's mini bid process. Okay, so let's talk about Category 2 budgets for the first full budget cycle, 21 through 25. So prior to this, you had a 5-year budget cycle, which was 2015 to 2019, and then we had a bump year, which was 2020, and prior to this 2021 year, Category 2 budgets were based on schools. So every school had their own budget, and that's changing with the 2021 cycle. Now you're going to have district budgets. We're still keeping a 5-year cycle. Going to start in 21, go to 25, and then every 5 years, you're going to get a new 5-year budget cycle. So in 2026, your second cycle starts, budgets are reset, and then in 2030, they'll be reset again. Okay? So what that means to you is every 5 years, you get a fresh pot of money to spend on your school district, or library system. All right. Now, how do you determine how much money you get to spend during this 5-year cycle? For schools, you get $167 per student, or a floor of $25,000 if you have fewer than 150 kids. For libraries, you get $4.50 per square foot, or a floor of $25,000. Okay, so that's how the budgets are determined. Now, I told you earlier that budgets are set in the first year of the cycle, and they stay locked in the first time you're funded. So what you do is you put in your numbers for your budget. Let's say you have 60,000 children. Your budget's locked in based on those 60,000 kids, or 100,000 square feet for your libraries. That money is locked in, and you have 5 years to spend that money. But let's say you build a new library, or let's say your school has a huge growth, your school system does, and you get 10,000 more children. You can have your budget adjusted up by requesting it to be changed through a special mechanism. Now, that mechanism doesn't exist yet because it's not even needed, so they haven't created it. But do understand that once your budgets are set, they're locked. and they don't get changed unless you ask for it to be done so in subsequent years of the cycle. Your budgets can't go down once they're locked, but they can go up. But you have to put that special request in through that special budget mechanism that USAC is going to create along with the FCC, and you can have your budget raised. Okay, and so you can ask questions about that in just a little bit. Oh, somebody asked if I was sharing my screen. I'm sorry, I thought it was already sharing. Oh, goodness. Thank you for that. So I've been talking all these minutes and my screen has not been shared. Now, please somebody tell me, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, I do apologize.
And I was using my own slides, so I didn't even notice. And I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me go back through this, and I apologize. Here is our training topics that I mentioned earlier. You guys are such a good audience. You just sat there like great little students and listened to me. But thank you for the note. Okay, this is the slide I mentioned about the Category 2 budgets with the first 5-year cycle. I'll let you read that for a second because I've already talked about it. This was the second slide about the school multiplier of $167 and $4.50 a square foot for all libraries. And then you have a funding floor if you have a tiny ADM or a tiny library. Right? And then we talked about adjusting the budget cycle and how you have to ask for your budget to be recalculated, because once you are funded with whatever the first year is that you use your CT budget is going to be locked. So once you're funded and that budget is locked, it stays locked for the rest of that 5-year period unless you ask it to be recalculated. And no, we don't know what that tool will be. Hasn't been developed yet. Okay? And this is the next slide. So if you do not request a recalculation, the budget will not change during the cycle. The new CT budget will apply for the year it was requested and forward, but does not apply retroactively, which means it can't go backwards to like 2020 or years prior to. Okay? All right. So let's talk about your entities. The budgeted entity is the entity with the C2 budget. These are going to be what we would refer to as your parent entities. These are your independent schools, such as a charter school, independent libraries, school districts, or library systems. No longer do schools within a school district or individual libraries within a library system have budgets. Budgets are at the district level, the library system level, and then of course always have been at the charter level or the individual library level if you're not part of a system. All right, how are budgets calculated? The greater of the following will be used. You will take the total number of your full-time student counts of each of your individual schools if you're in a school system, and you multiply it by the school multiplier, which is $167, or you can use the funding floor if you have fewer than 150 children. Okay? That's the aggregate funding floor. It's what they call the 25,000. Most schools don't have a number that low. Now the system calculates those numbers for you, okay? Independent schools or a charter school is the greater of that. So you're either going to take the floor, which is 25,000 if you have 149 children or below, or you're going to take the multiplier of 167 times your ADM. $167 times your ADM. If you have 10 or fewer sites in your school district, you're going to use a third way, which is a hybrid method. Now, only small school systems are allowed to use this hybrid method, where they can mix taking either the funding floor and, not the or, so mix taking the funding floor and the student count with the multiplier so that you get the maximum budget. And that's what this slide explains. So you're going to calculate the budget for the individual school, and you're going to use either the higher of the number, either the multiplication of the 167 times the student count, or the floor. So that's why we were telling you, if you used our came to our sessions earlier, to use the radio button when you do your profiles, do it by the individual school, because if you do that, then it'll maximize your funding. It'll take the higher of the two counts, either the floor or the 167 times the students. Okay? This slide explains to you at the bottom, if your school district profile has 11 or more individual schools, the third option of using the hybrid method does not apply to you. You cannot mix the two budget calculations, so it's only for small school districts. Okay, libraries. I don't even know if I have anybody from a library on here, but libraries work much the same way. You use your square footage, and you're going to add the square footage of each library together and multiply by 450. And if you have, you don't meet the minimum, you can use the funding floor of $25,000. Also remember, you need a square footage for all your bookmobiles and your kiosks entered as well, because 0 square footage does not count toward your budget. The minimum square footage would be 5,555 square feet. Takes you beneath the funding floor, but so you're looking for 5,556 square feet, which is going to take you above the funding floor if you're a library. So there's your cutoff. Where a school is 149 kids, you have a cutoff of 5,555 for square footage. Libraries can also use the hybrid method if you have 10 or fewer sites in your library system. So if you're a huge library system like maybe Wake County or Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools or Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library Systems, Mecklenburg County, you have lots of libraries, you would not be able to use the hybrid method. But if you're a small county library system and you only have 3 or 4 libraries, then you can use the hybrid method. Your main branch might be huge, and you can use the square foot method and then take the budget floor for the others and combine those to get a bigger budget. Okay, now this says additional differences from the test period. What the FCC and USAC are calling the test period for budgets was 2015 through 2019. So in other words, they're testing Category 2 and the budget cycle. 2021 and forward is considered a permanent Category 2 budget cycle. So from here on out, everything is going to be district budgets, and it's going to reset every 5 years, and that's the way things are going to be. So everything prior to that is considered the test period. So here's some other changes. Only full-time students are going to be calculated. Large school districts cannot estimate the number of students for buildings under construction, but independent schools still can. Those are like our charters. Our charters are considered independent schools, okay? The issue here is, and this hasn't been done before, is if you overestimate, if you're a charter, and you overestimate how many students you're going to have for new construction, and you overspend, you're going to have to pay back the non-discounted portion, the discounted portion in year 2. So if you say you're going to have 500 kids and they fund you based on 500 children for your construction and for your internal connections, but you wind up only having 350, you have to pay back the difference in year 2. So you're going to have to be very careful when you're estimating student counts for new construction. And this happens a lot with charter schools, because usually in year 1, year 2, they may lease a space. And then once they get going really well, they will build a permanent site. So you have to be very, very careful, because USAC's now saying you're going to have to pay us back. Usually they just let you stay in the negative until your enrollment caught up with your Category 2 budget. Okay, additional differences. Transfer of equipment. This is very, very important. The current rules are, and they remain in effect for equipment bought 2015 through 2020, is it has to stay in place for 3 years at the site you bought it for before you can move it. So beginning in 2021, you can put that equipment anywhere that you buy it, since it's a district or a library system budget, and you can move it around as you see fit, as long as it's going to another school or library. You still can't put it in a NIF, a non-instructional facility. So you do have the freedom to transfer equipment between schools within a school district and libraries within a library system. You do not have to notify USAC of these transfers, but the transferor and the recipient must maintain detailed records documenting the transfer. So in other words, you still have to maintain your inventory. You have to still keep up with your FRNs, your serial numbers, and you have to keep up with where the equipment was and where it goes. You still have to maintain all that documentation. But during that 5-year period, you can move that equipment around as you need to. Okay? School districts and library systems must wait until July 1, 2021 to transfer equipment that is less than 3 years old if they don't want to be subject to the requirement to notify USAC of the transfer. All right, so those are the rules for transferring equipment. Okay, now this is what we talked about when we talked about updating profiles. This is what the little screen looks like when you go into Manage Organization. You have to choose, are you going to give a number for your whole district or a number for each school? If you have 11 or more, you can report a number for your whole district. 11 or more schools, 11 or more libraries. But if you are small, you need to do a number for each school in the district. And that's 10 or fewer schools or 10 or fewer libraries. Reason being, the system will calculate the hybrid method for you, meaning it'll calculate the best budget. It'll pick up the floor for some schools, and it'll do the student count for some schools that have 150 or more schools. So if you don't choose the right radio button there, depending on the size of your school system or library system, you won't get the maximum budget. So that's very, very important. Okay, charter schools. And this is not for us because our charter schools are not part of a school district. Okay? So you are already independent, so you need to understand that. Our charter schools are not part of a school district. Part-time students only, they're going to be counted as full-time students. So all part-time students are now just considered full-time students. Okay, school buildings that are partially or fully closed due to COVID-19. Students have to be enrolled in a brick and mortar school to be counted as full-time students and count toward your Category 2 budget. Now, if you're doing remote learning with these kids, that still counts toward your Category 2 budget as long as they are enrolled in a brick and mortar building. Students who are enrolled in your virtual schools don't count towards your budget because they're not enrolled in a brick and mortar building. Now, a lot of you have been affected with these numbers because of COVID. A lot of parents have chosen to enroll their children 100% virtually. And I'm not talking about Plan C of A, B, and C. I'm talking about a 100% virtual school because of COVID. And that's one of the reasons why we're using last year's numbers, because last year's ADM numbers are higher and your virtual school enrollments are lower last year as compared to this year because of COVID. Next year, we'll look at the numbers again because you can use your numbers for 2 years, but not 3. So that's why we're using last year's numbers again this year. So the rules are, they have to be enrolled in a brick and mortar building. Your virtual schools don't count their enrollments towards your Category 2 budgets. So those of you who lost, like my big school districts who lost 10, 12,000 children to a virtual environment, that's a lot of money toward your budgets. So please understand how that can impact the budget with COVID-19. Okay? So that's why we're using last year's data and we didn't change those numbers. All right, now let's look at the budget tool. And I believe I have that already right here. I'm going to show you how to get to it, although we do have it linked on our website. You simply go to E-Rate on their USAC website. You're going to go to Tools, and you go to Category 2 Budget Tools. On our website, here's our website. Under Category 2 2021, I have it linked here, USAC Category 2 Budget Tool. And then right here, I have it open for you already. So let me pull the chat over to the side. Okay, make sure I see anybody's. All right, so this is a little bit different from the Category 2 budget tools that you have seen before, okay? And it looks like it has more information than you can ever imagine, and it does. But it's very simple to use, okay? So the easiest thing to do for you is to look here on the right, and you have state, applicant type, city, billed entity name, BIN, and consulting firm name. If you will simply go to BIN and put in your billed entity number, and I'm going to do one that's in this training session with me because I know this number by heart, and type in the BIN. It's going to pop up in blue. Click on it and click Apply. So that's the easiest way to use this budget tool. And if somebody else wants to put your BIN in the chat, I'll do a search for your BIN too. So this is for this BIN. And what it does is it tells you the current enrollment, tells you have 54 child entities. You have a full-time enrollment of 31,475 based on the Category 2 numbers that this entity has put in, and we're assuming their numbers have been updated. It tells you that the Category 2 budget is forecasted. Why is that? That is because they have not applied for any Category 2 funding so far, and this budget has not been locked and set. So this number right here, $5,256,325 is their forecasted Category 2 budget for 5 years of 21 through 25. And that's how you use the tool. Easy peasy. Okay? Now it's going to say forecasted until you actually apply for funding. And then you'll see these numbers change for what was funded and what is pending and so forth and so on. All right, does anybody else want me to look theirs up? Do you want to put your bin in the chat? And I'll do one for you. If not, I'll move on. Okay, I'll move on. But that's how you use the Category 2 budget tool. Now, if you will please put the parent bin in only. Remember, these are not school or library individual budgets any longer. So you're going to put your parent bin in. Okay? All right, now, Rebecca's going to talk about the School Connectivity Initiative and Category 2.
Hi, everyone. Okay, we're going to talk about excuse me, I'm having some issues. Okay, we're going to talk about DPI funding in addition to your Category 2 funding. So you first apply for your funding with your filing your Form 471 when the window opens. And you use the state master contracts. DPI filed the Form 470, so you do not have to go out with a Form 470 for this. Then you complete the mini bid process, which we will talk about a little later. Then you get an FCDL, a funding commitment decision letter, after all of your after your 471's complete and it has been through the program integrity assurance review. And then you're ready to get your equipment or receive your services. When that funding commitment decision letter is received, we send a funding notice over to our finance department, DPI Finance. We usually actually aggregate them for about 3 weeks at a time. And then DPI Finance sends the non-discounted amount over in the form of PRC 073 for school districts and PRC 036 for charter schools. So if they're approved separately or the WAN is approved and separately, you'll get separate funding for that within the same funding month, okay? Let's see. I'm going to make sure I'm on the same page here. Okay, state master contracts and competitive bidding. We at DPI filed a 470 last year, and we followed competitive bidding rules just as they're set out, and we have a list of service providers or vendors that applied to be on the state master contracts and were chosen for those. We have multiple vendors and we have OEM vendors, original equipment manufacturer vendors, and those vendors designated up to 5 resellers that will be on the contracts. And so that each of those resellers have a fair chance to get your business, they will all have to be contacted for quoting, okay? So let's talk about a mini bid. What is a mini bid? Since the state already did the 470 and the evaluation and chose multiple vendors for contracts, the school districts, library districts, charter schools now only have to do a mini bid because we did the big bid. You have to do the mini bid. So what is it? It's a process where you get a quote from all the vendors that offer the hardware that is required on the state master contracts. You request it via email, and we have a list of those. We have the process kind of down, and it's really getting much better this year, much better. We're going to take that process to evaluate the quotes we receive from those vendors and compare them with each other to find the most cost-effective solution for the school or library. And at that point, after that's been evaluated and chosen, the selected vendor gets a letter of intent sent to them saying, you're the one that won my mini bid, and we intend to purchase this equipment from you. Okay. We have a process demonstration, and here is the location of that mini bid template. So Roxy's going to click on that and take us over to the mini bid template.
Yes, what I wanted to show you is on our Category 2 2021 page, you'll find everything you need to get you through Category 2 for 2021. So under Mini Bids and Quoting, you'll see the template. You'll see some instructions that Rebecca wrote for you for doing quote request, and some vendor contract information, and also a sample letter of intent, which after we do the mini bid, we'll review with you as well. So let me pull up the mini bid. And I believe, if you'll let me know, you can see my screen. It should look a little different. Rebecca, can we see the mini bid?
Excuse me. Yes, we see it.
Okay.
The first tab contains the instructions on how to do this. And the first section is how to request a quote. So the first thing you'll do is fill out a project description tab. And in that, if we'll click on that, this gives all the information. We're seeking quotes for the following, and you'll put in the quantity for each type of equipment that you're looking for. And then right below that, all of the information about your PSU or library. And then we have dates that you can put in, and depending on when you file it or when you ask for the quotes, you want to give them as much time. Last year we only had 3 days because we were right down to the wire on these contracts. This year you have a little bit more time. So you'll tell those vendors, I want a quote or a no bid by these dates. And then in the description, you're going to describe specific details of your project and what you're looking for. And here, Roxy's putting in a sample that we have a Cisco network. So we're seeking equipment that's compatible with the Cisco network. However, we always want to use the verbiage that we're looking for that or equivalent. Those PIA reviewers are going to look at this information that you send out to vendors, and they're going to look for that language. I'm seeking, you can say Cisco or Ruckus or whatever. You can designate a brand, but you absolutely must use the verbiage or equivalent so that other vendors can bid on it. If you're looking for, let's say, access points, and you're looking for a specific brand, you have to also say or equivalent. And that makes it fair, and it gives all the vendors a chance to bid on it. Because as we know, some of the equipment is compatible together, some is not. You may have to have a lot of different things if you want to change over your network or whatever that goes. But you need to put all that project information there. And remember, again, I can't stress this enough, or equivalent, so that it makes it fair for all the vendors, even though they may not provide Cisco and you're asking for Cisco. And here we're putting in there, do we want managed services? Do we want it to include installation? So these are the things you want to put in there for your project description. Okay, so we go back to the instructions. So we filled out tab 1, and we've listed all the criteria, or we've listed all the information under project description. We want to go into that criteria, tab number 2, and we're going to review those evaluation factors. Do not change eligible cost in there. But you can change the other evaluation factors to be consistent with what you're looking for and the criteria that you're looking for. I mean, some districts may have a requirement, not so much a requirement, but a preference, we'll say, for local companies. So if that company is local, they might get an extra set of points or whatever. So anything that your district has additionally in criteria, you can actually put that in, but do not change in the eligible cost field. Do not change those. So what you put in this criteria, there they are, what we have, and we describe what those factors mean, a description of what they are. But you can change those. Do not change that the other fields in there.
Yeah.
But you can change the factors.
So in the E-rate world, we cannot tell you this is what you have to use, but we can give you some examples. So that's what we've done. So you may change any of these that you want to, and you may change the weighting.
Right.
However, cost must be on here, and cost must be the highest weight. So Mike made this idiot-proof, if you will. For example, if I wanted to change technical sufficiency to 35 points, look what it does. It tells you it must be less than eligible cost, tells you cost is not the greatest factor, which it should be, and it tells you down here at the bottom, combined weights must equal 100. Right now, I've got 105 because I added 5 here. So if I still keep playing with it, I'm going to take that to 15. I still have a problem because this has to be less than cost. This will help you not get in a denial issue with E-rate and a big audit, which we've had a few, because you didn't have cost as the greatest factor. So let's say I want to make it equal to cost. Nope, you can't do it. Cost has to be bigger than any of these others, okay? Doesn't matter how big. Let's say I make this one 29. You're fine. It can be one off. The problem is, or not the problem, the key factor is it has to be greater than any of the other criteria or factors that you have on here. So if any of these factors you don't like, feel free to change them to something that better suits your needs. Just make sure that your weights are set up to equal 100 and that cost is the highest weight, okay? Or point value. Actually, it should be a point value, not necessarily a weight, but a point value, okay? All right, let's go back over to instructions. And
okay, and all of what goes into that criteria tab is going to bleed over to the mini bid tab. They're automatically in there.
Yep,
Okay.
so let me change this back so
Okay.
it'll work properly. Get back to where we started. Okay, now, go ahead.
All right. Okay, so now we go to the mini bid tab. Okay, the mini bid evaluation. This one has all of the vendors and all of the vendor emails listed in here. Okay, and evaluation notes for your evaluation record. Okay.
Also
Please,
notice that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yes, I was going to say, please put the date in. We had several, more than several, who did not do that last year. And it was more difficult to prove to the PIA reviewer the date that this evaluation was done. Once the reviewer said, well, I don't know when your evaluation was done, and someone had put in a wrong date. The evaluation was before the bids came back, and that was a big row and almost resulted in a denial. So these dates, you got to pay attention that you put the date that you completed the evaluation and who did it, and then who was at the evaluation and the date and time that that was held. Okay.
Very important. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Do you want me to do this?
Instructions, or we're gonna?
No, we're gonna fill this out.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so let's say you sought services, and the reason you have multiple of these down here is that depending on the services you seek, you're going to have to do multiple mini bids. So let's say you did, you wanted APs and you wanted UPSs. So you're going to need to rename this to mini bid evaluation AP. And maybe I did UPSs, rename UPSs. Now, in some instances, where'd that go? Did the UPS show up?
No.
I think it's too long. Let's take this out. Let's rename. I think it's giving me some silly bits. Well, I'll just leave it as UPS because it's being silly. If you look back on our criteria, one of these is single source. There are some vendors that can provide everything you want, and you might have everything you need on one quote. Then you're going to do one mini bid, and you're done.
And you may want to label that one single source.
Yeah, everything I need. But there are going to be others where one vendor can do your APs and switches, one vendor would do your UPSs, one vendor may quote your firewalls. So then you're going to have to keep copying these and labeling them for the mini bid for the product that they're for. Then you simply go through here and you put who you got a bid received from and who you didn't. So it's a drop down, yes or no. I'm just playing here. I don't know who I got quotes from. And notice over here on the right, it pops in. If it says no, it says under total, no bid. They didn't send you a bid. It's okay. If it's yes, you're going to look at your quote, and you're going to put in your quote amount. So I'm just going to put in a quote amount. Ooh, that's a nice big quote. I'm going to put in another quote amount. Hang on. Okay. All right. So let's say I only got 2 just for time's sake. All right. Now I have to go across here and I have to evaluate each of my vendors in each of these categories because I kept all of this. Okay. I didn't change any of this. Now notice I have 100 points for each of these categories. This is for you and your team to decide. All right, so for cost, who was my lowest price That's the first vendor, so I'm going to give him 100 points. And watch what happens over in the gray. He gets 30. Okay, so this is happening against this up here, which is the weighting. He gets 30 points. So now I have to decide how far down am I going to go, depending on how many quotes I got, how many points is going to this next guy. Well, I'm just going to say, and I'm going to write this down in my notes, I'm going to drop 10 points for every quote I get, putting them in order by price. And that's a personal decision as long as you write down the reasons you made the decisions you made. All right, so I'm going to give this one 90 points. So back in the mathematical world, he's going to get 27. All right, technical sufficiency. So let's say I am a Cisco shop. I really want Cisco equipment. They both quoted Cisco equipment, so I can give them both 100 points. Okay, vendor experience. All right, I have worked with vendor B here, but I haven't worked with vendor A. I don't know them from Sam. So I'm going to give vendor B 100 points. I'm going to give vendor A 0 points because I don't know who they are. Ineligible cost, neither one of them have any. Everything is E-rate appropriate, and everything will be covered at 100%. So notice what's happening over here on the right. Okay, technical support. They both are going to get maximum of points. All right, single source. Both of these can provide everything I want, so they're both getting 100 points. So as you read their quotes, you're going to make these delineations and these choices for points. Now notice what happened. The vendor that had the highest price won my bid or my business based on these points. And the difference is he might have been $2,300 more, but he's the most cost effective based on my evaluation here. Okay, so I'm finished with this one. I am going to fill out my information here, fill out my information here. I'm going down here. I'm going to make my notes, and notice everything carried down here of why I did everything I did up top. And then I'm going to send my winning vendor a letter of intent, and I'm going to cover that in just a second. You will continue completing mini bids until you are finished with all of your quotes and all of the hardware that you plan to purchase, or services if you're doing services such as basic maintenance or managed internal broadband, cabling, anything like that. Okay? All right. So let's talk about what happens next. So you've got your vendor selected. We know by our points it's going to be this little dude right here. All right, and here's his email. So we're going to go write him a letter on our district or charter stationery, library stationery. We're going to mail him a letter of intent. So I'm going back to a little home page here. Here is a letter of intent. And I'm going to pull this over. It's a copy paste. Your life is easy. Place on your letterhead. Rebecca, you want to review that?
Yes, you're going to put it on your letterhead. You're going to address it to the vendor and include their SPIN number. You're going to put your information below it and, of course, the date. Then you're going to say this is a letter of intent for E-rate related, and you're going to have the fiscal year. And then you're going to have your gear or your services there and whatever contract that you're going to purchase it through. And then you're going to fill in the areas that are shown in red that meet your circumstances. And then you're going to ask them at the bottom, you're going to ask them for a bulk upload and matching updated quote.
Easy peasy. We've done it all for you. Okay?
Don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. So let's go back to the mini bid itself. So
Okay.
how do you know who to email? Well, they're all right here. You're going to drag this down. You're going to copy all these people. Well, yep, there you go. You're going to copy all these emails. You're going to paste it into the to field in your email. And we'll go back to project
description. Yeah.
Project description. You have everything here. Let me go back one more to the instructions.
Yeah. Okay.
You simply copy all those email addresses, put it in your email, and you literally are going to attach the mini bid once you filled out this project description, and you're going to shoot this to them. They're going to open this up, they're going to read your project description, and they're going to decide what they can and cannot quote on, and their instructions are right here in the yellow. Please confirm receipt of this request via an email with quote forthcoming or no bid. So they should respond back to you. Okay? And we are, or rather Mr. Michael Ramsey is going to do training with our vendors and explain this process to them. And once you get their quotes back, you will start completing your mini bids. Okay? Now, you don't have to wait until you get them all in. You can start entering yeses and nos and the amounts as they start coming in, or you can wait until you get them all in. Okay? And I believe, Rebecca, did you read on here, do they still have the 3 days?
No, I think they can fill in that we desire to receive all quotes and bids by.
Oh, yes, there you go.
Because last year, we only gave 3 days because we were in a time crunch because it was so late in the year.
Right.
This year, you can start earlier and wrap it up earlier. So, and you can decide.
Exactly. Okay, very good. And right here, back in your instructions, we want you to use in your email a subject line. You're going to enter the name of your school, school system, library, NCDBI Cat 2 quote request, because the vendors will know what to look for. And in the body, you're going to copy and paste this, and then you can attach the mini bid that has the project description filled out. Now, some of you may choose to have a spreadsheet with all 637,000 items you want to purchase instead of going through this process. That's okay. We're only doing this to help those of you who want to use this tool, but if you have your own spreadsheet with what you're looking to purchase, then you can attach that spreadsheet instead of the mini bid. This is simply a tool to help you if you would like to use it. Okay? The next set of instructions is how to evaluate the responses, and we pretty much went through that with you. I'm going to be quiet and let Rebecca go ahead and go through this.
Okay. Okay, and you may find that you need to complete multiple mini bids on certain types of equipment or services in that case. And as you see below, what we did here is we just copied and pasted a mini bid tab worksheet for as many as we needed to. And then after that evaluation is done, you're going to put that date in there. Never forget that date and the information. And then you're going to notify that winning bid, winning vendor. And last year, we also, PIA reviewers during selective reviews were asking to see where you notified the losing vendors. And I don't believe you're required to do that, but it is a courteous thing to do. When I would be doing it, I would definitely notify them as well, just out of common courtesy. Because if they did bid, then they deserve to know what the outcome is. But it is, I don't believe, Roxy, that is a rule that you have to, but it's a good practice. It's a best practice to do that.
Right. Yeah, and usually if you're putting out your own 470, you only have 2 or 3 vendors. That's a practice to follow. In a mini bid process, and you're just receiving quotes and not full on bids, it's not necessarily a requirement.
Yeah, but it's a nice to do, not necessarily a need to do.
Just make sure you keep the documentation.
Right, right, because you will have to provide it at some point in time. Okay, so I think we've done that other than the keeping the copies, and we have a whole training on documentation that's coming up. So what happens if I don't follow this process? Well, we know because last year there were some who either didn't understand it, didn't do it, did it incompletely, forgot some things on it. And what happened? Denials. We did have some denials because of things were left off, or I think the most common thing was that they failed to ask all of the vendors.
Yes, that is true. They failed to ask all of the vendors to quote.
Right.
You cannot pick and choose.
Yeah, or use that language, or equivalent.
Yes.
When you're asking for a specific brand. And we had one, and I'll go ahead and throw this out while we're talking about it. Okay, let's say, for example, I have Meraki equipment and I need licenses. Well, obviously, I can't use an Aerohive license for a piece of Meraki equipment. And folks said, well, that's just common sense. So they only sent their mini bid quote request to the brand that matched the license of the equipment. It's like, well, why would I have to send a request for Meraki licenses to a different brand vendor? Well, you do. You just do. So even though you're pretty sure a Meraki vendor is going to quote you a Meraki license, and the other vendors are not going to have a Meraki license, you still have to ask for it. So it may sound stupid, and common sense, but you still got to do it because the rules are the rules.
Exactly. All right. So that's the Category 2 budget and the mini bid process in a nutshell. Do you have any questions you would like to ask? Go ahead and put them in the chat box, please. You may go ahead and start. If you have your list of equipment ready and you plan on using your C2 budget for 2021, you may start this process. If you would like Rebecca and I to review your worksheet and your emails, just let us know. We'll be happy to do that for you. Any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions.
We did a great job, Roxy.
I hope so, Rebecca. That means we'll have no denials this year. All right, we do have a documentation retention workshop coming up on December 9th from 11 to 12, and we will talk about what you need to keep and how you need to keep it. So hopefully you guys will join us. We have not scheduled our 471 training yet. That will be coming when we find out when the window is going to open. So we'll talk about 471s then. So we appreciate you guys joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a very good day.